When was the last time you felt solidly middle class? Not aspirationally middle class, not technically middle class based on income brackets, but actually middle class in the way your parents or grandparents understood it. Stable, secure, able to buy a house, raise kids, take a vacation, and retire without anxiety. If you're under 40, you might not have ever felt that way. And if you're over 40, you might have noticed that feeling slipping away year by year, so gradually you didn't see it happening. The middle class isn't disappearing because of a recession or a crash or a single policy change. It's disappearing quietly, through 1,000 small adjustments that individually seem reasonable, but collectively remake the entire economic landscape. Today, I want to show you how this is happening. Not with politics, not with blame, just with numbers and patterns that, once you see them, explain almost everything about why life feels harder than it used to, even when the economy looks fine on paper. Let me introduce you to David and Michelle. They're both 34. They live in Charlotte, North Carolina. David works as an operations manager at a logistics company. Michelle is a registered nurse. Combined, they make $142,000 a year. By any statistical measure, they are solidly middle class. They're in the 65th percentile of household income in the United States. They both have college degrees. They both have stable jobs with benefits. And they feel like they're barely holding on. Here's what their actual financial life looks like. After taxes, Social Security, Medicare, and their retirement contributions, they take home about $8,400 a month. Their mortgage on a 3-bedroom house they bought 2 years ago is $2,650. Property taxes are another $340 monthly. Home insurance is $165. They have 2 car payments totaling $720. Auto insurance for both cars is $245. Daycare for their 2-year-old son is $1,400 a month. We're at $5,520, and we haven't bought groceries yet. Student loans between both of them are $580 a month. Groceries for a family of 3 run about $750. Utilities average $190. 2 cell phones, $130. Internet, $75. Health insurance, even with employer contributions, costs them $420 a month out of pocket. Gas for both cars to commute, about $280. Now we're at $7,945. They have $455 left for the entire month. That needs to cover everything else. Clothes for a growing toddler, haircuts, birthday gifts, co-pays at the doctor, the occasional dinner out, saving for the next car repair or home repair. David and Michelle are not living extravagantly. They're not going on international vacations. They're not buying designer anything. They bought a house in a decent school district. They drive a Honda and a Toyota. They're doing exactly what middle-class people are supposed to do. And at the end of every month, there's almost nothing left. Now, let's compare this to what middle class looked like a generation ago. In 1990, David's father worked as a manager at a manufacturing plant. He made about $45,000 a year. That's roughly $105,000 in today's dollars when you adjust for inflation. So David and Michelle combined are making about 35% more than David's father did alone. Michelle's income is essentially extra. They should be doing much better, right? Here's what David's father's budget looked like in 1990, adjusted to today's dollars. His mortgage was about $1,450 a month in today's money. Property taxes were $180. Home insurance was $75. He had 1 car payment of about $380. Insurance for 1 car was $95. There was no daycare cost because David's mother didn't work. His total committed housing and transportation costs were about $2,180. David and Michelle's committed housing and transportation costs are $4,120, nearly double. But it gets more interesting when you look at what wasn't in the 1990 budget. No $1,400 daycare, no $580 in student loans because college cost 80% less in real terms, no $420 in health insurance premiums because employer-sponsored insurance covered almost everything. Cell phones barely existed existed as a household expense. Internet didn't exist as a household expense. David's father had committed expenses of about $3,200 in today's dollars. He brought home about $6,500 after taxes. That left him with $3,300 in discretionary income. David and Michelle bring home $8,400. After committed expenses of $7,945, they have $455 left. A single income in 1990 provided more financial breathing room than a dual income today, even though the dual income is higher in real terms. So what happened? How did the middle class quietly become the squeezed class? The answer is that the cost structure of middle class life fundamentally changed, and it changed in ways that don't show up clearly in inflation statistics. Housing didn't just get more expensive, it got more expensive relative to income. In 1990, the median home price was 2.9 times the median household income. Today, it's 5.8 times. Even with lower interest rates for the most of the 2010s, the total cost of housing as a percentage of income nearly doubled. Education didn't just get more expensive, it became a mandatory expense with debt attached. In 1990, you could work part-time and pay for a state university without loans. Today, the average student graduates with $30,000 in debt. That's $300 to $500 in payments for a decade. Healthcare didn't just get more expensive, it shifted from employer-covered to employee contribution. In 1990, most employers covered 100% of premiums. Today, the average employee pays $6,000 a year for family coverage plus deductibles. Daycare barely existed as a major expense in 1990 because single-income households were viable. Today, if both parents work, daycare can cost $12,000 to $20,000 a year. But if one parent stays home, you lose that entire income. These aren't small changes, they're structural changes, and they all happened gradually over 30 years, so at no single point did it feel like a crisis. But the cumulative effect is that being middle class now requires two incomes to achieve less financial security than one income provided a generation ago.
Here's why most people don't see this clearly. There's a cognitive bias called relative deprivation. We don't compare our lives to the past, we compare them to our peers. David and Michelle look around and see their friends in similar situations. Dual incomes, big mortgages, daycare costs, student loans. It feels normal because everyone is experiencing it. What they don't see is the historical comparison. They don't realize that their parents' generation could buy a house on one income, raise multiple children, and retire with a pension. That's not their reference point. Their reference point is, can we afford what our neighbors have? And the answer is barely if we both work full-time and manage everything perfectly. There's another factor, the illusion of choice. David and Michelle feel like they chose this life. They chose to buy a house. They chose to have a child. They chose their careers. So it feels like their financial stress is the result of their decisions. But the structure they're operating within has changed. Their choices are being made inside a system where the cost of basic middle-class stability has increased faster than wages. They didn't choose that system. They're just trying to navigate it. And because the changes happened slowly over decades, there's no clear moment where you can point and say, this is when it broke. It just gradually became harder, and everyone adjusted, and now this is normal. Let's project David and Michelle's situation forward 20 years. If they continue on this path, their income will probably grow, maybe to $180,000 combined by their mid-50s. Their mortgage will eventually be paid off, though that's 28 years away. Their son will eventually age out of daycare, though by then they might have another child, or he'll be in expensive after-school programs and sports. Their student loans will be paid off in their mid-40s. That frees up $580 a month, but by then they'll need to start thinking about their son's college fund. That $580 will just redirect. Here's the critical thing. They will likely never build substantial wealth. At 55, they might have $400,000 in retirement accounts if they consistently contribute.
Their home might be worth $550,000 with $200,000 left on the mortgage, so maybe $750,000 in net worth. That sounds like a lot, but it's not enough to retire comfortably at 65. It's not enough to help their son with college. It's not enough to weather a major health crisis or job loss. They'll be financially stable, but not financially secure. They'll be middle class in name, but not in the way that term used to mean something. Meanwhile, people who understood this shift early and made different choices are in a completely different position. The ones who rented cheaply through their 20s and invested aggressively. The ones who avoided the two-car, big house, dual income trap. The ones who lived below their means even when they could afford more. Those people have options. David and Michelle have obligations. So what could actually be done differently? The financially intelligent response to this new middle-class structure is to recognize that you can't build wealth by just participating in it normally. The margins are too thin. You have to make choices that look weird to your peers. Living in a smaller house, driving older cars, one parent working part-time or not at all to avoid daycare costs and keep expenses low, aggressively paying off debt before expanding lifestyle, renting longer to build investment capital. None of this is what we're told middle-class life should look like, but the old middle-class playbook doesn't work anymore because the economics changed. The people who are building wealth today are the ones who recognized that the system shifted and adjusted their strategy accordingly. They're not following the script. They're writing a different one. The middle class is disappearing quietly because the cost structure of middle-class life has fundamentally changed, but the narrative hasn't. We're still told that if you get an education, get a good job, buy a house, and work hard, you'll be fine. But the math doesn't support that anymore. Not the way it used to. David and Michelle are doing everything right according to the old playbook, and they're struggling. Not because they're failing, because the game changed and no one updated the rules. If you feel like you're working harder than your parents did for less security, you're not imagining it. You're experiencing a structural shift that happened so gradually most people didn't notice. But now you see it, and once you see it, you can make different choices. If this changed how you understand your own financial situation, consider subscribing. I break down these patterns every day. Clearly, calmly, no blame, just reality. Thanks for watching.